In this edition of It's About Money, we'll be talking to Bleu Cease, who is the Executive Director of Rochester Contemporary in downtown Rochester. We'll be talking about what art has to offer in downtown Rochester. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome to another edition of It's About Money. I'm Nannette Nocon and thank you for joining us. Our guest today is Bleu Cease, who is the Executive Director at Rochester Contemporary, also known as RoCo. Bleu, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So what's RoCo? What's Rochester Contemporary?
Well, we're a small contemporary art center in downtown. We're on East Avenue. And we sort of operate like a museum, except we don't have a collection. So we sort of straddle the contemporary art gallery world and the museum world.
I see. And it's a non-for-profit organization.
Correct.
And funded by?
Funded by you, funded by me, funded by, we're funded by New York State, so of course taxpayers fund us, of course. We have certain donor base, and we have a membership base. We also have certain events that bring in income, and we have several large fundraisers every year.
I see. So it's not so well known. What is the mission statement of the organization?
The mission is to promote and foster contemporary art in Rochester. And I would say the vision, which is a bit broader, and that is to be a venue for the exchange of ideas, to bring fresh contemporary art into Rochester from outside of the region, and sometimes from other countries, to really plug into the vital contemporary art scene in other cities, in other areas, and bring those ideas to Rochester.
So how do you define contemporary art? I mean, it's certainly not, Van Gogh is not a contemporary
Sure,
artist,
yeah, well,
what is contemporary art?
And different institutions define it in different ways, really. A common definition is work made by living artists.
Oh, okay.
There are some stylistic definitions, perhaps, but we try to shy away from specific definitions based on content or style or approach.
And actually, your exhibits have been quite varied, right?
Yeah.
Could you talk about the variety and how you select the exhibits and so on?
Yeah. Well, lately we've demonstrated 3 different models of exhibits. We've had a real community-based exhibit over the summer, which was called 6x6 by 2008. We invited people from all around the world to make small 6x6-inch artworks, donate them to the gallery, and exhibit them. And then we sold those for $20 a piece. It was a fun exercise, a community building exhibition. It brought about 5,000 people in the door in a month. People from 25 states participated in 6 countries. So that is really a broad exhibit. We also recently had an exhibit called State of the City, which was a 5-person exhibition, thematically designed around projects that deal with important issues in Rochester, Syracuse, and Buffalo. So kind of looking regionally at these 3 cities and how contemporary artists from the region are reflecting on the most important issues to these cities. So there's the potential to compare and contrast the issues, compare and contrast creative approaches in the 3 cities. And then, of course, we also have, this fall, we'll have an exhibition by Sam Van Aken. So it's really a 1-person show of very large, monumental media sculptures. They're primarily sound-based sculptures. So those sort of demonstrate 3 types of exhibits we have. But then, of course, very different content throughout those kinds of shows as well.
I see. Let's talk about the 3 different types of art. So the first one you'd mentioned is 6x6, which ran from June 6th of '08 to July 6th of '08.
Yeah,
is that right?
that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it was a fundraising event, correct?
Yeah.
So when you said 6x6, it meant literally 6 inches by 6 inches of art.
Yeah, little square artworks. And what we did is we put the word out, primarily using the web and email blasts and listservs. And the goal was to collect 2,008 of those artworks. And we were just overwhelmed when we received 3,500 from, like I said, about 25 or 26 states. The word just spread. We had whole classes participating from School of the Arts and other high schools downtown Rochester. Very famous artists from all around the country. Mayor Duffy made a piece. I believe you made a piece, and your husband made a piece. People of all artistic abilities and experiences participated. So that's the sort of broadest definition of what we can be. We can be a place where people come together to sort of pick and choose what they like and what they don't like. Another spin on that exhibit was that all the pieces were exhibited anonymously. They were signed only on the back. So that's also a fun way to look at serious issues within the contemporary art world. And the big issue there being, do we value an artwork only because of its signature? And so an exhibit like this kind of asks us all that serious question when the stakes are very low, because we're talking about $20 artworks, many of them made by kids, but also mixed in were some very famous and somewhat valuable artworks. So it asks us a serious question within a kind of a playful community building context.
And you said you had 5,000 people attended the exhibit. Is that right?
in 1 month. And the history of the gallery is to have about 3,000 in an entire year of programming.
Oh my
So
goodness.
we're growing like crazy right now. We're doing really well.
That sounds like you've done a great job picking the different programs and exhibits.
Yeah, I think that the diversity of the programming is really key. Because like I said, part of what we do is we sample what's going on in the broader contemporary art world, and there's just an amazing diversity of approaches today that are embraced by contemporary art. And by that I mean that contemporary art is very open to different disciplines. In many ways, contemporary artists use history and philosophy, and they talk about politics, they talk about environment, they talk about land use perhaps, architecture of course. But all of these topics come together in the contemporary art world really on the cutting edge of contemporary art. So that's what I'm most excited about bringing to Rochester.
That's great. And then the second exhibit you were talking about was the State of the City, which, like you said, showed the state of Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester area.
Yeah.
And you had some lectures along.
Yeah. Yep. Let's see, three of the 5 artists in the show came to give artist talks. So they, will have maybe 20 or 30 people attending the talks, and they'll sit with the artists and walk through the space. And the artists will tell some of the stories behind the artworks, perhaps, talk about some of their motivations, talk about their life experiences. One of the artists that was in the State of the City exhibit, his name is Robert Burley. I was very excited to bring his work to town. He has been photographing the demolition of film production facilities all around the world. In a very neutral way, as a landscape photographer, he's been photographing the destruction and removal of these big industrial structures owned by Kodak and AGFA and Polaroid and other companies. So, and that's a great example of how contemporary art can be very multidisciplinary. You can use these big photographs. They're beautiful photographs, but they're also about the economy in Rochester because of our history with Kodak. They're about land use because, of course, taxation and environmental issues, many other issues can be approached by looking at these photographs.
That's great. So how do you come up with ideas on what kind of exhibits to put on?
I think that, as I said, if we're looking broadly at the contemporary art world, coming up with the ideas is never an issue. It's only an issue of figuring out how to make them happen and more of the logistics of scheduling and fundraising and things like that.
I see. And fundraising is certainly an important aspect of your role. Right?
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
the success of 6x6 is phenomenal, I think, to help finance the programs of the center, right?
Yeah. And we've received a lot of new foundation support from around the world, and we have some national level arts funding now. It's been a long time since the institution has had that. I should mention that the gallery has been around Rochester in several different locations for 31 years. and it's had a very rich history, but also a somewhat underground history. You know. It's always been present in the community, but it's never been, of course, as present or as visible as some of the larger museums. And that's okay. There's a place for that, of course. But certainly we're growing right now, so I think we'll be more visible.
Yeah, it's nice not to be the best kept secret.
Right, right.
That's great. So where is Rochester Contemporary located?
Right downtown. We're in East End, 137 East Avenue.
So it's near the venue for the jazz festival.
Yeah, yeah. We're
East
right in
End
the
Fest.
middle of Jazz Fest, and that's been great. It's a very vital neighborhood, with the little theater, RPO, Eastman Theater, of course, and coffee shops and bars. It's a great scene.
So then do you capitalize on that scene? Like, what kind of hours do you hold? Like for jazz festival,
Well,
it's in the
yeah,
evenings.
yeah. For Jazz Fest, we stayed open late for most of the evenings. Usually, our hours are more afternoon, Wednesday through Sunday, 1 to 5. Those are our typical gallery hours. But what I've tried to do is initiate a citywide gallery night called First Friday,
Okay.
which is a way for us to stay open late at least once a month, and also bring other galleries along on that same schedule, so that the public can just be guaranteed that a certain number of these participating venues are all open, and people can visit downtown and jump around and visit several of the galleries in one evening.
That's great. So it's called First Friday, and
Yeah.
it's the first Friday of every month.
Yeah, and it's from 6 to 9 p.m. And that's sort of that's the beauty of this. And certainly these gallery nights are happening all around the country. The beauty of them is that it just sort of seeps into the consciousness around the city, and everybody just knows that First Friday is a time to go to the galleries.
Great. Now, is there an admission fee to go into RoCo?
There is not a hard admission fee, and that's an interesting question. In fact, right now we're reconsidering that and moving toward a firm but very low donation ask at the door. So we do ask for $1 at the door from everyone, which is sort of it's actually, it might be surprising to you, but it's actually kind of a reconsideration of the way art galleries like us operate. To have an admission is somewhat new for a small, not-for-profit contemporary art gallery. There's a history of them wanting to be free and open to everyone and anyone. But the realities of our situation are that we need to ask for a small donation at the door. Another aspect of moving in this direction is that it's a statement to the visitor, that we're there, and that we're there for a reason, and we have a real concision in our planning, and also that it costs a lot for us to be in that neighborhood. An interesting side effect of moving in this direction has been people spend a lot more time with the exhibits. Some of our exhibits, we're much smaller than a major museum. So some of our exhibits, in theory, could be taken in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. But now that we're introducing an admission fee, people stay in the gallery longer. Even though it's such a small admission price, people stay longer and they look closer, which is wonderful.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
You get more value for your money.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, it's an inexpensive way to spend the First Friday, look at all these different galleries and look at what's out there and educate and kind of check out what's kind of the pulse, so to speak, of what's going on in the art community.
Yeah.
But that's really amazing. That's fantastic. So what is your target audience? Is it like everybody?
Yeah, I think that's really where we're going. It's everyone. Certainly the First Fridays is more of a college scene and an art community that comes specifically to those and sort of hops between the different galleries. But for example, I'm starting to have regular tours from a few retirement communities, which is wonderful to have these real cutting-edge contemporary art exhibits and to give tours to retired folks who will come in, and they have loved the work. It's really surprising, and and somewhat counterintuitive how open some of these people were to just experiencing this really fresh artwork made by very young people. It's been a really an eye-opening experience to open to all these different groups.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great. Our guest is Bleu Cease, who is the executive director at Rochester Contemporary, also known as RoCo, located downtown Rochester on East Avenue. Welcome again, and thanks for being here,
Thank
Bleu.
you.
So tell me about some of the collaborative work you've done with other arts organizations in town.
Well, the key collaboration was this First Friday initiative, which, as I mentioned, kind of brought everyone in together on the same schedule. All institutions like us, similar venues of display of one sort or another, whether university related or small commercial galleries. So that was a big part of it. But also we've collaborated with recently with the Landmark Society, which was nice. We were the base for their Inside Downtown tour. We collaborate with Image Out. We host their Image Art Festival exhibit during the Image Out Film Festival. We're going to collaborate with George Eastman House on a long-term 6-month exhibit about greening of cities and sustainability in Rochester. So various types of collaborations, some specifically about a program and some more about expanding visitorship and bringing new people in and us helping to benefit other institutions as well.
I see. And one of the projects you did in the fall of '08 was this parking concept, park at the park.
Parking Day was
a
called.
parking day was called. Okay,
Yeah.
tell me about that, because you brought art outside.
Yeah. Well, that's part of an international day. Once a year, people all around the world transform parking places with meters on the street into parks, into green space. In various ways, they redesign the little square into a park. And it's a fun way of advocating for green space in cities and demonstrating the need. Though we're very lucky in our current location, we have a beautiful park right next door. It's still a fun way for us to participate in an international dialogue about the need for green space in cities, because it's somewhat surprising for someone to drive down the street and see a small park jutting out beyond the curb into the parking lane and occupying that space. So we did that for one day, along with City Hall. City Hall participated, George Eastman House, and Art Walk, all transformed parking places. It's important locally for us to collaborate like that, and it's important for us because, of course, the issues are relevant. But it's also, I feel specifically, that it's important for us to plug into, for Rochester Contemporary, to plug into these international events like that. Mm-hmm. It kind of puts Rochester, it reminds us that we need to constantly look at what's going on out there in the world. And doing so through initiatives like Parking Day is great.
Yeah, I think it's great. You see a series of cars and all of a sudden green space with a bench and some other trees and that kind of thing. So what a brilliant idea. I think a lot of people like, oh, stop, and what is that?
Yeah.
No accidents, I heard.
No.
That's great. So what are your biggest challenges? I mean, these arts communities have challenges, all over the place. But what is the biggest challenge of RoCo?
Well, first I'll say I know that there's been some discussion recently about certain not-for-profits, art centers or performing art not-for-profits closing the doors and really struggling to stay open on account of the economy. But certainly we are not in that situation. We're doing really well. I think to some degree these things are all relative. Since we've been on this sort of trajectory of growth recently, I haven't noticed a real effect of the recent happenings in Wall Street, of course. But of course, everyone is worried about this within the not-for-profit world, that people will be less generous with their donations. We somewhat expect a slight decline in membership. Probably at the lower membership levels first. So fundraising at times like this, that's a big challenge, of course. But like I said, I think all these things are relative, and as we've been growing recently, reaching out to new foundations and expressing and demonstrating our recent success has been sort of self-fulfilling.
That's great. So it sounds like you've found some creative ways to help continue the financing of the organization.
Absolutely.
And you talked about the 6x6 selling the art for $20. So were you able to raise a good amount? How many art pieces?
Yeah, we sold 1,100 pieces.
Oh, fantastic!
So it was a wonderful way to raise general operating funds, but it's also a wonderful way to do that by engaging people who maybe don't have a lot of extra money to make large donations.
Mm-hmm.
There were many college students who purchased those works, and of course there's hopefully they feel some ownership over the gallery and some sense of participation in our recent success by sort of owning a piece of the gallery. It's certainly a new model. It's a very different model than the classic membership, member drives.
Give us money. And,
give us money.
Really
phone calls, letter writing campaigns, and things like this. Of course, those are all part of what we do. But I'm constantly on the lookout for new ways of raising funds.
I see. So will you be repeating the successful?
We're going to do it only once, and
I
that's a key. We're going to do it once more this summer,
Mm-hmm.
But we're not going to beat it to death.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
that's an important part of this. It was successful because it was new,
Sure.
and we have to remember that.
Sure.
So we'll be moving on after this summer.
Yeah, you want to be progressive as opposed to hanging on to something
Yeah,
that slowly dies. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's great. So yeah, you're absolutely right that in many communities, many of the arts organizations have collapsed or closed their doors because they haven't been able to raise enough money to keep the operations going, or cost for expansion have gone up and
Yeah.
those kinds of issues. But yet you haven't had to face those things. But you continue to have financial needs as an organization, though.
Yeah, and certainly those needs go up. I mean, our RG&E bills have gone up by probably 15% in the last year, 10% in the last year. So that's sizable for us. That's
The part of the budget.
utilities are a big deal for a small not-for-profit like us.
Yeah.
So.
So what's your vision of the future for RoCo?
It's growth, absolutely. I think the vision is for us to increasingly be a destination across the region, not just locally, but a destination across the region for contemporary art. And we're already becoming that. It's wonderful when I communicate with foundations in New York or foundations in Albany. They're hearing from artists. These foundations are hearing from artists in New York City, in Chicago, and across New York State about us as a great venue. And that's because we're really we're doing things a bit differently, and we're really pushing the envelope of what people normally see in Rochester.
That's great. I mean, it gives recognition not only to RoCo, but to Rochester as a community,
Exactly.
putting us in the little map there.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, for example, how many people participated in Parking Day, but, it's nice to be included in that list of
Yeah.
communities that participated in that concept.
Exactly. Yeah. No, not probably 200 people stopped by that parking spot during the day, that's great. It's not that's not an earth-shattering number, right? But like you say, it's nice to plug Rochester into that international scene.
Sure. Yeah. No, how do you have a big staff? I mean, do a lot of things?
No, it's just me.
It's
just me right now,
okay.
and but I have a great crew of volunteers and interns. At any one time, I have between 4 and 8 interns from local colleges and universities, mostly art students, or actually some business students who are interested in being involved with the gallery world. Perhaps they want to head to New York from college, and during college they want to get some experience at comparable galleries. So they work with me 1 or 2 days a week.
And how do you find the volunteers?
They seem to find us and me. So
great.
So yeah, it works out very well.
Yeah, word of mouth or something, whatever.
Yeah, well, we're on several listservs for volunteers through the United Way and others. But but really it's word of mouth. Primarily for interns, it's probably word of mouth through their professors.
I see. Very nice. So really, you're a one-person operation, a non-for-profit, and rely on volunteers to help out. And
Yeah.
you certainly do a magnificent job. I didn't really know about RoCo until having moved downtown, but it's nice to have that nearby and see the wonderful art. And many times you're surprised by it, but it's interesting though. It stretches your mind, and I like having that outlet for creativity shown downtown.
Good.
So
Good. That's
really
good to hear.
Yeah. So now you also do some work, like you said, like with Eastman House
Yeah.
before, right? Yeah. And so parking there was partially done with Eastman House, or
Yes.
and then you have a project
Yeah,
coming up.
we're going to collaborate with Eastman House on basically a 6-month-long program of workshops and lectures and salons and guided tours, all dealing with environmental issues, agriculture and greening of cities, agriculture specifically in urban environments. So that 6-month-long program will lead up to an exhibit at our space that will run at the same time as an exhibit at George Eastman House. This is all inspired by a wonderful project that happened in LA about 2 years ago called Not a Cornfield. And this was an artist project, an artist named Lauren Bond. She gained access to a 32-acre brownfield, an old unused rail yard in downtown LA, and turned it into a cornfield as a work of art. And then around the cornfield became sort of a focusing point and a metaphor, but they did all sorts of programming at the cornfield site, where they brought people in. They had storytelling sessions and workshops and drawing workshops, and also a lot of projects dealing with the immediate history of the neighborhood. They taught workshops on urban agriculture, teaching kids from the neighborhood how to grow organic vegetables and fruits. A wonderfully diverse set of programs were built around this artwork as a cornfield. So we're looking at that as a very ambitious project and as sort of inspiration for our initiative here in Rochester. And it's called PLANT, Place, Land, Art and Agriculture, Neighbors, Technology.
Yes. Very nice. What a great concept, and to find 32 acres of brownfield in LA is kind of unusual.
Yeah.
That's a very congested city.
Absolutely. And we don't have any immediate plans or funding, certainly, to transform a brownfield in Rochester, but the whole notion of this kind of project is to sort of ask people, what if? There are numerous polluted sites around Rochester, and this isn't about pointing fingers, but it's more about envisioning what the potential is for some of these problem sites, but not only in the sense of remediating the land and repairing the land, but also in terms of building solid community and healthy community around these projects.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Bleu. Really appreciate you being here and talking about RoCo, Rochester Contemporary.
Thank you.
And thanks to our audience for joining us today. We talked about art in contemporary art in Rochester, New York. Visit the website of RoCo, which we'll be posting on our screens momentarily. But please visit RoCo on East Avenue, Rochester Contemporary. Thank you again, Bleu, and thank you, our audience. I'm Nannette Nocon, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for tuning in to today's show. If you have any questions for It's About Money, please email Nannette at nnocon@aol.com. This program was produced through Penfield Community Television in Penfield, New York.